Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Well, hello, everybody. It's Kate Valentine.
And I'm Fahrusha.
And we're very lucky today.
Well, we have a few. We got a slate first.
Oh,
Kate.
Sorry, excuse me.
Today is Tuesday, October 11th.
Oh, it's true. We have to.
And because we want to let people know that this is our 38th podcast here.
Okay.
We're going strong.
And
we have today two very interesting things for our listeners. We have the results of our contest to win the 3-volume set of books by Lisette Larkins. And we also have a fabulous guest. Now, our guest, whose name is Eva Herr, comes from Georgia, and she is the author of 2 wonderful books. Her first book is called Agape, and it has already been out for a little while, but her current book is Consciousness, Bridging the Gap Between Conventional Science and the New Superscience of Quantum Mechanics. Now, Miss Herr had a radio show for quite a while, wherein she interviewed new thinkers and people who were paradigm shifters, just like our show,
and
paradigm
physicists
and physicists. And so her show right now is on sabbatical, but it was a very excellent show. And what this book is about, it is transcripts of 10 of the interviews with leading thinkers on the subject of what is consciousness.
That's a huge question.
It certainly is. So let's, I feel like saying, let's put our hands together and welcome Eva Herr, but that's, of course,
that
wouldn't
doesn't
work.
come over the
Doesn't
air.
work.
No.
But please, let's welcome Eva Herr.
And thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I think what our first question would have been is that we were sort of reading your biography, and you were in the legal field, which is a fair distance from where you are now, and we were wondering how you bridge that gap.
That's a really good question. The only thing I can tell you is when consciousness knocks at your door, you either get the baseball bat on your shins, or you go crazy.
Okay.
And, it was in front of my face, and it was relentless, and I didn't have any choice. Because when consciousness wants you to do something, you pretty much don't have any choice but to do it.
Okay. Now, when you say something like consciousness, it almost sounds as if you are referring to sort of a, all right, I'm going to say this, but I don't necessarily mean it, like a universal sort of a voice, like something, something outside yourself, anyway.
I choose to use, there are many definitions of what is consciousness, and that's one of the problems in the world today. And my personal definition in this particular instance is the ground of all being. It's everything, that energy that underlies everything that is, that original intention, perhaps, or the original source, whatever you want to call it, that higher power. How's that? I don't like to use descriptive name words because I don't like to step on anybody's toes.
Right. Well, and it's also, I think once you do that, you start to box yourself in, too, as to, what your meaning is. And certainly something like consciousness is not only in the metaphysical realm, but in the medical realm as well. It's almost impossible to define it. And certainly to, if you were interested in the medical field, trying to discover what caused a person to become conscious, it's very difficult.
Well, that's actually, if I recall correctly, that's the first, what I did, let me just back up. What I did is I had a friend who was an astrophysicist, and I'm just a woman. I'm a woman who had a very powerful spiritual epiphany, much like Eckhart Tolle. And I I wasn't seeking it. I didn't even know that it existed. I didn't know metaphysics existed. I didn't know any of that stuff. I just went to bed one night and woke up different the next morning. Okay. So I had this friend that was an astrophysicist who was also spiritually awake. And so he was very learned, as he had a PhD in physics. And so he had read, everything from metaphysics to astrophysics. And so we decided that we would review pretty much everything that was out there that day and question what was left. And so we made up what we call 20 questions. And one of those questions would be, what is consciousness? What is mind? What's the difference between the two? What's the difference between big mind and little mind? How does one actually access big mind? What was the source of the original intention, and how does that intention get conveyed into human beings? What was the source of the original creator? All of those kinds of questions. And so we posed our questions. There were actually about 30 of them, I think, originally. And then I went to searching because I was a litigation paralegal, and I worked for the best of the best. So I had learned quite a lot about how to do research to the best of my ability. And so I went out in the world and I found who I considered to be the most respected and credentialed physicists, mostly physicists, but a couple of biologists and a couple of medical doctors. And I interviewed them and I asked them all the exact same questions. And what I found out was astounding. What I also found out was the people that I thought really knew what they were talking about really didn't know what they were talking about at all. And so I interviewed probably 100, 150 people, and I narrowed it down literally. I think there's 12 or 13 people in that book, and that's who made the cut.
11, if you consider both Robert John and Brenda Dunn as two different people.
No, just one.
I know it was just Brenda Dunn, but it's written in the book as Robert John and Brenda Dunn. So there are 10 different people, but can you hear me quite clearly? This is Fahrusha, by the way. And I think we should give your scientist his name, Roy Scruggs. Is it not? Roy Scruggs, PhD?
That's correct.
Okay,
that's correct.
I like to give him a little credit here because he did a very masterful job here with his how it all started area there. So you began to interview these people and you were very impressed by about 10 of them. And what I found very interesting was that the question you asked, what is your definition of consciousness to each of them? And that is very, very interesting to get an answer from people. And so do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, it was very, anything you could imagine. It was the irreducible unit of an atom. It was the 0-point field. It was aware that you're aware. It was aware that you're aware that you're aware. It was opposite of being in a coma. It was God. It was opposite of being asleep. It was everything. Anything that you could think of, it was that thing. And Amit Goswami, one day he called me and he said, Eva, I think this is the single most important book that I've ever read. And I said, why? And he said, because I had no idea this was going on. He went, no wonder that we can't have a meeting of the minds in science. We will never have a quantum leap in science as long as this problem exists. And that problem is, every year scientists gather annually somewhere to present their papers on quantum mechanics and consciousness. What is it? To talk about their model of physical reality. And many times these physicists get in huge arguments, sometimes, almost coming to blows. Papers are thrown, chairs are thrown. So imagine, let's just say 50 scientists coming to a round table and they're all talking about their model of physical reality and they're calling it consciousness, and everybody gets into a fight. And that fight is because everybody's defining that word differently and no one knows it.
Well, it's true.
And so they're all talking about different things, and they don't even know it.
Well, that goes so far back. I mean, the ancient Greeks with Democritus, with the atom, and then you have Descartes, I think, therefore I am. And, this is, I don't know that, and I guess you feel as if you come to some sort of certainly a personal definition, but I don't know that it's ever going to be truly defined.
Well, I think it is whatever it is that you're talking about. I think that people need to define definition A, definition B, definition C, whatever it is, or at least say in this particular sense. If you'll notice, I did that at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
In this discussion, at this moment, I'm talking about the energy at the irreducible unit of an atom. In other words, that force, the force. Well, whatever you want to call that thing.
Well, you certainly agree with physicists because that may be some of the source of controversy, because they sort of shrug off biology, psychology, all the others, and they say that in the end, everything is physics. And you're taking it one step further, and you're saying in the end, everything is actually quantum mechanics and the force that binds all energy, the energy that binds all matter together. So I would have to agree with you completely.
But even the physicists argue. Bill Tiller called me, and he's like one of my greatest mentors. I'm just like such a fan, and when he called, I was just thrilled to say hello. And Eva, it's Bill Tiller. I was thrilled. I just knew he was going to call and say, what a great job, And he called and he said, Eva, this is Bill Tiller speaking.
Okay.
I just want to let you know that I read your book and I hate it.
Oh.
And it like to destroy me.
Oh.
I was actually on vacation when he called at Cracker Barrel having dinner. And I said, what do you mean you hate it, Bill? And he goes, well, I said, why do you hate it? And he went, because everybody doesn't say what I say.
Ah, there you
go. And he said, I now know that I can't retire.
Uh-oh.
And so that was pretty much what he meant. He didn't mean that he really hated my book. He meant that he didn't realize that problem had existed. So, and there are many people, like, I'm not going to name any names.
Mm-hmm.
I'll name one name, Bill Tiller.
Okay.
Bill Tiller had tried to talk with another one of the physicists who I believe he made the cut in the book. I can't remember everybody that made the cut. It's been a couple of years since I wrote that book. I'm pretty sure that he did, but Bill had been trying to reach that physicist to talk about models of physics and physical reality. And that physicist would never call him back, ever, over years. He just wouldn't respond at all. So I said, well, you know what? Tell me what you want him to know, and I'll at least make sure that he reads it. So Bill said, okay. So he wrote like this 2-page letter, this big long letter, because it was in an email. I don't know how many pages it was. So I sent it to this other physicist, and I said, now read it.
Mm-hmm.
So he read it, silent. So a few years later, maybe not even a few years, maybe a year, I interviewed that physicist because he wrote a new book. And lo and behold, if that letter from Bill Tiller didn't instigate that new book that he was writing.
Wow.
So when I interviewed him, I said, why did you not respond to Bill Tiller? And he was like, well, he just kind of stumbled around. But what it basically boils down to is that's how they get their grant money. And nobody wants to share because they're afraid somebody else is going to steal their idea, when really that's what it's going to take to have a quantum leap in humanity, in science.
To share.
It's for them to talk. And, money just gets in the way.
Well, where would you imagine that quantum leap landing? Where do you think it's all going to come to?
Well, I'm not sure I understand that question.
Well, supposing all the physicists did come to some conclusion, and they really came to a definition of consciousness that everyone agreed upon that was actually true. What direction do you think science and, forget science, just civilization in general would go to?
Well, I certainly suspect the potential of world peace and a clean world.
That would be nice.
If everybody really understood, and they do understand it when you interview them individually,
mm-hmm.
they do understand what I'm about to tell you, but for some reason they can't put it into perspective when they do their numbers.
Okay.
Do you believe that there is an irreducible unit of the atom? Well, yeah. Do you believe that that is a field or a wave? Well, there's different opinions about about what it is, but most people say that it's both a field and a wave.
Right.
Well, do you believe that that matter really exists? Well, no. Well, what does that mean? That means that we don't really. Well, excuse me. Then I'll say, do you believe that we live in a holographic environment? Well, yeah. Well, what does that mean? That means that we don't really exist, and that whatever is here, it's all one thing, and that thought must manipulate that thing. Well, yeah. But we're individual. We're still individual, but they just can't get it. I don't know why. Actually, I believe that it has to do with what I call gradients of consciousness. That's the way, if you have read David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, I truly believe, and it seems to be very evident to me, that gradients in consciousness exist. Somebody and it's not bad or good, it's like age. It's not bad to be 5, and it's not bad to be 50. It's just you're 5 or you're 50. You have more knowledge if you're 50, typically,
Really?
So, yeah, I hope so. Anyway, but not really, because it depends on your gradient and consciousness where you fall.
Where does the state of consciousness, in other words, the mind state, affect that? Like if you're in an alpha state, a beta state, a gamma state, a theta state of consciousness, how does that fit in there, or does it?
Let me think about that for a second. I think, I don't know about the gamma. Ooh, somebody shut something. I don't know about the gamma, but I do know, that low theta is when you're in that meditative state. But I think it's more about awareness. How aware are you of who you really are? Are you primarily aware of your conditioned state? The things that your parent. Do you know what you know because somebody told you, or do you know what you know because you know it?
Because you experienced it in some manner, shape, or form, even if you experienced it on an inner level as opposed to an outside world level. In other words, it's not about the outside world necessarily.
As Miss Herr was saying, it depends on your gradient. I was having this discussion with my father once.
Really?
Yeah, actually, I was a little smart, little
whippersnapper.
No, a little smart pain in the patoots is what I was. And I said,
whippersnapper.
Yeah. So I was going, George, we don't really exist, and we're all energy, And he said to me, yeah, well, let me tell you something. The last time you stubbed your toe, you said, ouch. And I think there was some reality there. And I said, okay.
Well, the way I describe it is it's like...
That was like, again, a gradient. I mean, he was very, very material. He was a wonderful, but I mean, when I say materialistic, I mean, he would not have, he would have thought about this type of a thing, but it was not his reality at all. His reality was, you put the key in the lock and the lock opens, period. It doesn't open because of good intentions or anything else. That's just the way it is. You have an infection, you get some antibiotics, you get better, period. And that was his worldview,
a mechanistic view of the universe.
Yeah, and it worked very well for him too, and it carried over to me a great deal as well. But having been exposed to people like yourself, Miss Herr, I have to open up my eyes a little bit and think, well, maybe there is a little bit more out there.
Well, I have to tell you something. I am probably the most black and white person you will ever meet.
Well, if you were a legal investigator, yeah, there's got to be something of that in you.
I'm so black and white. But what I have, what I have learned is like when I say gradients in consciousness, take politics right now. If you talk to a politician on either ticket, it doesn't matter, and you try to tell them your perspective about whatever it is that you think, and you're on the opposite side, will they listen?
No.
No matter what good information that you give them. And let's assume that your information is the best, that it's completely credible about whatever it is.
Okay.
And they absolutely refuse to hear it.
Okay.
That would be a very low gradient of consciousness to me. You feel like you're talking to a telephone pole.
Okay.
And they feel like they're talking to a know-it-all.
Okay.
It as a person grows consciously, they might think, well, maybe I ought to go, let me think about that. Rather than, or religion. If you've ever talked to somebody in a fundamental religion and you're trying to tell them about oneness and quantum mechanics, I got a new T-shirt recently. It says, "Science doesn't care what you think."
Good one. A very good one.
It's on my Facebook page if you want to see it.
That's a good one.
Science really doesn't care what you think. And no matter what you tell them, 2 oranges and 2 oranges is 4 oranges. But they're going to argue with you that it's not. Because 1 orange is not fully ripened and it's not completely orange. It's still a little bit green. So you don't have 4 oranges. They don't care. You don't know what you're talking about. So you're talking to a telephone pole and they're talking to a know-it-all. As you grow as a spiritual being, those things change. On Hawkins' scale, he uses 0 because there are no words really to describe this. So he uses 0 to 100, 100 to 101 to 200, with 1,000 being like the non-dual state. And at certain places, like around 350 on that scale, and they say that people only grow about 3 points a lifetime. However, Noetic Sciences did a research project. Gosh, it's been probably 10 years since I talked to them about this, but they said they'd had more documented cases of spontaneous enlightenment in the early to mid-90s than ever before in the history of time.
Isn't that interesting? And you did actually speak to the gentleman who is involved with Noetic Science Institute now, somebody who we would love also to have on our program, Dean Radin. And how did that work out?
But he was not the one who did that project. It was Cassandra Veaton and another woman who I can't think of her name.
Okay.
It was 2 women there, but that just goes to show that something's happening. But anyway, but when you get about at 350 on that scale is when you start thinking, something's wrong with my belief system. Something is wrong. There's a void in my life where I'm not sure that I believe those religious beliefs that were taught to me as a child. I don't know what it is, but something's not quite right. So you start seeking. You read everything you can get your hands on about metaphysics, about self-help books and everything. Then when you get about 450 or 500, something happens. You don't know what happens because it happens from the inside, but just all of a sudden you go, it's a huge aha moment. Oh my God, I get it. And you start feeling love to everybody. Like when I had my enlightenment experience, which happened to be back in 95, when I woke up that next morning, do you have children or pets?
Yes.
You know how when they're little, you just love them so much you want to squeeze them almost till it hurts?
Like a golden retriever puppy?
That's the way I feel about everybody.
Wow, that's great.
I can get angry at somebody. But that doesn't mean that I don't love them that way.
Well, what was there?
And that's a gradient in consciousness.
Was that that event that you talk about that brought about that epiphany?
Yes.
Yeah. Huh? Yeah.
Well, let us just say that we're speaking to Eva Herr, and let her talk. Just mention the names of her two existing books now. Eva, would you mind just saying that for our audience so that they can go out and get your books?
My first book is called Agape, The Intent of the Soul. And agape is a Greek word that means unconditional love for your fellow mankind. And my second book is, and it's my story about what happened to me and how I came to know the things that I do, because I wasn't always this way, I promise. I was the most materialist person, narcissistic woman you've ever laid your eyes on. You probably wouldn't have even liked me. Seriously. And then my second book, I wanted to know what the hell happened to me, because it happened overnight, and I was not looking for it. I wanted to know what happened, because I'm so black and white, I just have to understand what happened.
Okay.
And so that's when I started researching and finding all these physicists and asking them, how was this a physiological event? Was it a psychological event? What was it? Was it a dream? What was it? And that's when I found Edgar Mitchell, and the same thing happened to Edgar Mitchell when he was coming back from the moon.
Yes.
When he was coming, he saw the moon and the Earth in the distance the size of a nickel, and he's like, oh, my God, everything that I know is on that nickel, or quarter, actually. But
he was a wonderful man, and we all mourn his loss. I had the pleasure of meeting him one afternoon in New York City and having a conversation with him, which was one of the most memorable conversations of my life. So I'm with you on that.
But you were right. He felt that at that moment of his epiphany that everything was one.
I'm sorry, say again?
His moment of epiphany, I think, was he realized that everything was one.
Yes. And from my perspective, people will say, have you read this book? Have you read that book? Have you read this book? Have you heard this person? I go, no, I don't need to read their book or hear their story. There's only one story. Every single person that I've ever interviewed, and it's been hundreds, and I asked them that question, it's all the same. There's only one. It doesn't matter how you get there. The road may be different, but the destination is the same. From what I've found, and I've talked to hundreds of people about this.
Yeah. Do you feel like a mission in your life that you have to bring that epiphany to other people?
At the very beginning, when it first happened, I was a woman on a mission.
Okay.
I thought if I could just tell these people, I can save the world. But then I realized that people thought I was crazy. I thought I was crazy because I didn't know where it came from. In fact, I checked myself into a mental hospital.
Really?
Yes, because I didn't know where it came from, and I wasn't looking for it. I mean, I just woke up, and here I have, it's like somebody took volumes and volumes. Let me put it this way. I didn't take physics. I made straight A's in high school, but I didn't take physics because I didn't want to have an F on my report card. Okay, that's about how much I knew about physics. Where now, I can talk a physicist down.
Okay.
I can't talk numbers, but I can talk theories, and it came from somewhere. And I also woke up profoundly psychic. I can tell you your health for the next 20 years. I can give you subtle symptoms that you're having right now that you don't even realize is a symptom. Where did that come from? And I woke up knowing people. I woke up knowing Daniel Brinkley, Raymond Mooney, Norm Shealy, and Caroline Mace, just like I know myself. And I'd never heard of them before.
Wow, that's amazing.
Raymond turned out to live on the same road as my grandmother in Alabama. Daniel and I was standing in a hotel up in Charlotte, North Carolina, that checking in about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember. And nobody was there. It was dark, and I went in to check in with my little girl, and somebody came up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder and leaned over in my ear and said, we've known each other for millenniums. And I jerked around. I thought some nut had followed me in from the highway.
Really? I would have probably pelted him.
And I turned around, and it was Danyon. And now Danyon and Kat are my kids' godparents.
Huh. Oh, that's
nice.
You
know, and Norm, I met at Council Grove, and it's so interesting. The same man introduced me at the Council Grove meeting that introduced Caroline to Norm.
Oh, wow.
20 years later, or however many years later. You know, and what's the likelihood of somebody even going to Council Grove, much less having that happen?
I don't know, but I was very happy to make his acquaintance at the Monroe Institute recently. This past year, Norm Shealy was there in the professional division meeting, and what a wonderful man he is.
He is my mentor, I'm telling you, and I need something. My kid was giving me problems eating, and I called him up. Norm, what do I do? My kid fights me because I eat organic and I eat free range and grass fed, and my kid just won't do it.
So then your child then started to eat. Norm helps you out with
Norm
that?
just said, that's his problem. That's his soul path. Just let him eat what he wants to eat to have peace. So
I think you have to have desire to change in life. I mean, you can point things out to people which are true. About them, they can ask you for advice or help, but if they don't have the desire to make the change, you're just talking to that telephone pole you mentioned before.
That's right. So how long do we have on here?
Good question. I don't know. Why, did you want to bring something up in particular?
Well, there's some things that I wanted to make sure that we talk about before we end. I wanted to talk about intention and prayer, which to me are synonymous.
Okay.
Many people say, they all want to pray about whatever it is that they want to pray about. And I just want to make sure that people know if you're trying to accomplish something with prayer, Dean Radin told me something one time that really made a lot of sense. He said, Eva, imagine that you have a pond and you want to get all the water out. So that's your goal. That's your intention. That's the thing that you want to pray about. So you got 100 people, and you're all standing around that pond, and you're starting to pray about getting the water out. So everybody's saying their own prayers, which would be equivalent of everybody picking up a little rock and throwing it in and hoping to splash the water out. It's not going to happen. So if you really want to get the water out, what you have to do is you have to get all the people on the same page. Everybody needs to get a pebble the exact same size, the exact same shape, the exact same weight, and they have to throw it into the pond at the exact same moment. That way, it's more like one giant boulder, and all this water will splash out. In other words, I've gone to a church before, and I hear the people pray, and they pray for 20 minutes, about all over the place. If you want to say a prayer, thy will be done. The single most focused prayer you can get is thy will be done. If everybody's praying that same thing, she is healed or I'm healed or thy will be done has the highest intention for the thing to happen. So I just wanted to talk about that because, it's important if you're trying to accomplish something with prayer, you're more like if it's within your field of possibilities to happen, because it's not always. Everybody's going to die. There's always going to be bad things, but if it's within your field of possibilities, that's the most likely way to get it to happen.
So you're sort of equating prayer with intention or intent.
It's the exact same thing.
Okay. Well, and I think it's easier for a lot of people to accept intent or intention because prayer carries with it, some of the
religion.
And organized religion and penalties for not praying, and which is sort of not what prayer is about.
The fundamentalists will accept intention, but some people won't accept prayer. The use of those words. So I just use that word.
Well,
and another thing.
I was just going to say that it is interesting that there have been some studies done that indicate that you can change things approximately 6% by your intention. However, if, say, Kate and I, Fahrusha, were to intend the same thing in a, contemporaneous way, it ups the ante, so to speak, and it may go anywhere from 10 to 14% as a result of that, tipping the scales towards our intention. That's just what I've read in terms of the experimental models.
Yeah, like hometown.
Well, I do know that, Bill Tiller built that intention unit. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Well, he built this little black box.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, but I don't believe I am, it's just been a while, that he used magnetic monopoles to build it. And Bill and his wife and Norm and his wife meditated and placed an intention in that box. And the intention was, for this particular time that I'm talking about, they had got a water company to donate lots of cases of water and sent them to laboratories around the world. The reason they got it donated because they didn't want anybody to think that they tampered with the water.
I see.
So the four of them meditated and placed an intention in the water that the pH in that water would increase. I can't even remember how much it was.
Well, let's just say
I
1
think
point.
by 3 points. I
Okay.
think by 3 points.
Okay.
I don't know. Could be 1 point. But anyway, a few points, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that exact same happened. Within 3 days, all of the pH in all of those bottles of water increased, let's just say 1 point, because I really can't remember, by 1 point. Do you know how significant that is?
Yeah,
Very.
I do.
If your pH can change, that could kill you.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
And so then they did the same thing and brought it back down. And then they did it another time with fruit fly larvae. They accelerated the growth of fruit fly larvae by 25%, just with thought.
Now, this is extremely interesting, but also interesting is the use of these magnetic monopoles, which are reported strangely in issues surrounding UFOs, that the metallic elements that have been beamed by UFOs, like the hood of your car or something like that, turns into a magnetic monopole. It's been reported. So I have to express the fact that I don't really understand in terms of physics what a magnetic monopole is and how it is created.
I don't either, but I really don't, okay, understand that. But I think that it has something to do with energy going back and forth at the same time. But I don't really know. Honestly, I really don't know. So you can't rely on what I'm saying right there.
Okay.
I just know that scientists around the world dispute that they even exist.
Yeah, I think that's the
what
general
Bill
consensus.
told me.
Yeah.
Yes.
But so that's your primary thing, this intent. And then what was the second thing that you wanted to discuss?
The other thing I wanted to talk about was free will. Everybody I talk to said, I have complete free will. I have complete free will.
That's a very sticky subject now.
And I want to make it very clear, we do not have complete free will.
Not
we
complete.
have will.
Not complete.
No, not complete.
Okay, but to some
not
extent.
Complete.
To some extent.
We have will that we can say, raise your right arm, and you can raise your right arm.
Okay.
But if we had free will is different. If we had complete free will, and it's kind of a catchy thing there.
Yeah.
It's kind of a trick question. If we have complete free will, would you ever lose your child to death before you?
Oh, God, no.
No.
Would you ever have cancer? Would you would you have a flat tire in the middle of, I don't know where you live, but I live in Atlanta, in the middle of 285 at 5 o'clock?
No.
I doubt I would do that.
No.
It's like
Not
horror,
high up
the
on my
horror
list
of all
of good
horrors.
things.
No. But I tell a little story. Imagine that you're a 2-year-old and you're strapped in the back seat in a car seat, and it's got a little yellow steering wheel. Have you ever seen those things?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you really believe at 2 years old that your steering wheel is driving that car.
Okay. Good analogy.
And so you pull up to a four-way stop, and the playground's on the right, and your grocery store is on the left, and their higher power, in this particular instance, your mom, most likely. You start getting excited. Oh, I'm going to the playground today. And she's like, nope, sorry, we're going to the grocery store. And you get mad, and you start turning that steering wheel. What's going to happen? Nothing.
You go into the grocery store.
So you pitch a fit, and you kick the back of the seat, and you start screaming. And at this point, if I'm your mom, I'm going to stop the car, and I'm going to run down in the bushes, and I'm going to get a switch, and I'm going to switch your leg. What your free will really is to, okay, I'm going to the playground another day.
Okay.
That is your complete free will. So we do have complete free will, but that complete free will is not what you think it is. It's how you respond to what's in front of your face.
That's
how do you choose to respond? It's a very powerful thing.
It's a great analogy too. I like it.
That is very good. I always tell my clients that they can. There's certain things that are free will, and there are certain things that are fated. And you just have to find out the difference between them. It's probably free will whether you eat Italian food or Chinese food tonight. But if you happen to get on that wrong airplane that just happens to be going down, then it's fate.
Our intent here was to bring up your intent, and you've certainly done that, and especially through your books. And we appreciate you so much being with us. And
yes, thank you very, very much for being on Shattered Reality Podcast.
But we have to announce the book titles again.
Yes, go ahead, Eva.
It's Agape, the Intent of the Soul, and Consciousness, Bridging the Gap Between Conventional Science and the New Science of Quantum Mechanics. And I am honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it was our pleasure, truly. Thank you so much. It was such great information. Thank you.
And bye for now.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Have a good one.
Thank you, Eva.
Okay, bye-bye.
Well, that was really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
She did a wonderful job.
I'd say.
What we have now is a special treat for our listeners.
Do you want a drum roll? To announce the winners.
Well, what we're going to do, actually, is we're going to read some of our comments. And then,
okay.
Would that be okay? Can you help me here?
I think that's great.
So, do you want to start? Or?
No, please, go right ahead.
Okay. Providencia says, thank you so much, Fahrusha and Kate, for this podcast. I've never read any of Lisette Larkin's books, but listening to this podcast and others has broadened the aperture I view this level of consciousness through.
Again, consciousness.
Yeah.
It just keeps coming back to that.
And so, I'm not going to read my replies. I manage the mailing list most of the time.
Okay.
But then, do you want to go on with Kinney?
Oh, okay, because that's short. This is good.
Yes.
Kinney says, great podcast. I am fascinated by your excellent guests, for example, such as today. That was great. Please have someone on about forbidden archaeology. Kinney, I would love to. That is such a great topic.
Yes, it is.
That is phenomenal.
How about Carmen Bolta? Should we try Carmen Bolta?
Why
or
not?
Who's that gentleman from Boston? You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do, and I can't think of his name.
Well, he would be great, too.
Yeah.
Whatever his name is.
Isn't that terrible? He wrote the book, Forbidden Archaeology.
Yes, he did, and I like him a lot,
and he was on the UFO show 2 or 3 times.
Yes, I know. You had him on.
I can't.
Let's get him on again.
It's my mind going to Swiss cheese. I have to get it demethylated.
Demiurge NYC says...
Oh, boy, that's a long one.
Experiencer is a welcoming neutral term.
Yeah.
Alien and extraterrestrial, on the other hand, border on sensationalism for the sake of sales, rather than to move the conversation and the access to knowledge forward, both of which Lisette does quite interestingly. I also prefer the term, like life in the beyond, to describe the place of experiences rather than the interlife, which might more connote the time, place between incarnations. But as Lisette says, what a challenge to describe the indescribable, and what a wealth of experiences she has to describe. These are way more than just a contactee who may have encountered a gray alien. In the interview, Lisette touches on the vastness of experiences that appear to be available in the beyond, should one be able to set aside one's addiction to one's analytical mind and open to this vaster reality, which once embraced and practiced will allow one to grow through grace, not through karma and wrongdoing. But perhaps the veil of unknowing is a gift, for with great knowledge comes great responsibility. Or as the information in the Edgar Cayce readings puts it, knowledge not lived is the only sin. Very fascinating interview. And then he follows up by saying, I understand that some people are overwhelmed by their experience and need support or validation. It is wonderful that this is now more and more available to them. However, personally, I would appreciate knowing what the benefit is, what the practical use is from the experience, in quotes, the alien experience, we're meaning here. While the circumstances of the abduction experience is somewhat interesting, to be told that a download of information occurs and not told what that information is disappointing. At this point in time, our evolution as a species, do we really care what color the craft is? How many minutes did or didn't pass? What do we really get from all of this? What? That we are not alone, that life exists beyond, that we are supposed to be nice to each other? Although I have myself experienced the in beyond, while the experiences were extraordinary and entertaining, I still get up and I have to go to work. Is it time for information to be provided that actually solves some of our serious problems and not just provides another visualization exercise? Or tell them to stay home?
Way to go, Demeter.
You want to do Freeman there?
Yes, this is an old buddy of mine from the Kate Valentine UFO show.
I remember him.
Always incredibly great comments. And
yes,
it's good
smart.
to see you back, Mr. Freeman. Really, really a big hello to you. So Freeman says, I'm not an experiencer, but I am fascinated with the possibilities. It struck me that Lissette's descriptions may suggest that experiences are like an infant whose body and mind are learning to perceive and interact with its environment. We all learn in order to increase our efficiency, whether we realize it or not. But to what end? What is it that allows our mechanical minds to see color? Have our brains and bodies also evolved abilities at the quantum level? See how this all comes together? Like she was just talking about consciousness. Like the quantum compass in a robin's eye, and a leaf's ability to exploit light. Is there any possibility that quantum entanglement provides perceptual links across space-time? Suppose reality does include an aspect that is paranormal in nature. What effect would proof have upon a society as a whole? What proportion would ignore it and what proportion would embrace it? Would reactions be the same within alien societies and upon artificial intelligences? How would it affect their approach to contact and interaction with alien races? Is the physical universe finite, or does it have the ability to absorb the advance of life? Do we live in a multiverse that disperses individuals across an infinite realm? Even though the internet provides contact across the planet, it is sometimes surprising how little communication takes place in certain areas. I sometimes wonder if alien worlds exist with populations more intent on virtual reality games and soap operas than outward exploration and discovery. Is the great silence due to apathy or infinite possibilities? As always, great comment, Freeman.
Yes, he's really great. Yeah. He's a consistent commenter too, which is very nice.
Yes.
Now we're going to go on to Roxanne. Some of you may remember Roxanne as an experiencer who gave her experiences with Men in Black at the end of one of our episodes. So Roxanne says, Lizette's experiences are quite similar to mine. I attributed these states to Kundalini and Samadhi. I was also under tremendous stress when they began. One night I went to bed with the thought that I would not get up again unless I received some sort of answer. Did God exist or was it all meaningless? I think That sense of surrender is what sets these experiences off, along with the intentionally asking for help. Perhaps these beings, whatever they are, can't help unless we ask them. My experiences drew me to the Monroe Institute as well. It was very helpful to meet other experiencers. Good word, she says. She likes the word experiencers. No one seemed to have a real explanation for what the beings we met might be. Each culture describes them according to their own mythology. Tibetans see Buddhist masters, Hindus see gods, and Christians see angels and devils. Jung felt that there were other parts of our subconscious, but this was not entirely true. He relied on his guide, Philemon, for advice. There are some things in the psyche I do not produce, but which produce themselves and have their own life. That was a quote she gave from Jung. She furthermore says that I have encountered beings who seem beyond anything we consider human. They did not fit in any category of supernatural being I was familiar with. I had the impression that although they were basically benign, they could injure us by their sheer power if one bumped into them unintentionally, sort of like bumping into a strong electrical field that could kill you, but the electricity itself had no intention of harm. So that's a very nice one, too.
Yes. Oh, excellent.
How about Miss Grape? Do you want to read what Miss Grape has to say?
Sure. Miss Grape said, it is quite interesting to consider that the beings we may encounter non-physically may not be pure good or pure evil, as we may initially think. While I have not been visited by any entities that I'm aware of, I know that in popular culture, movies, and books, people are often visited by either good spirits, whose only intention is to help, as in A Christmas Story, or bad spirits who only want to hurt, as in most horror movies. Yet if these entities are anything like humans, it would make sense that they have a whole scale of different values and intentions for contacting us. Perhaps some just accidentally bump into us just as we might on a crowded city street, with no intention of sending an important message. I wonder if this inferred duality may be the advent of monotheistic religions, with God being pure good and Satan pure evil. I know pagan religions have gods and goddesses with more human-like traits. They can be both good and bad and very emotional. True. Good thinking.
A good comment from Miss Grape. Dee Danzo had something to say. This is perhaps more amusing on synchronicity and the number 3 than a comment on your interview with Lisette Larkins. Though you are giving away 3 books, so who knows? Anyway, the horse farm where I work and keep my horse is owned by 2 friends of mine, one of whom is very interested in the afterlife. Having gone to a number of readings with John Edwards and others, and yes, I am happy to say she's had both dogs and horses come through to her. Oh, I see. The dogs and horses who were her pets or under her care came through to her. Last week, within the space of 5 days, I had to put to sleep one of my cats, Oscar. This same friend had to put to sleep her cat, Pookie. And in between, we had to put down her beloved, wonderful old horse, Aussie. At 32, a good age for any horse, much less off-the-track thoroughbred, Aussie was truly king of the farm, and we all loved and doted on him. A few days later, my friend and I were talking about our 3 losses, and she explained the concept of soul groups, which was both very interesting and very comforting. The next day, when I looked in my horse's water trough to see if it needed to be filled, much to my horror, I saw 3 young birds floating in it, barely alive. I have never had any luck in saving birds. My mother, yes. Me, no. But I couldn't just leave them. They were in full-blown shock when I scooped them out, ice cold, shaking like crazy, and totally limp. I put them in a bucket full of paper towels and put them in my car to warm up. 15 minutes later, I took the bucket out to see if they were dead yet. Absolute shock and joy doesn't begin to describe my feelings when I moved the paper towels and all 3 birds burst out and flew away, practically fine and chirping all the way to the nearest tree 100 feet away. Was it Oscar, Aussie, and Pookie? I don't know, but it was definitely very eerie. Oh, and by the way, this horse farm is in Montgomery, New York, just a couple of miles from, you guessed it, Pine Bush.
Ah, Pine Bush.
Well, you want to say what Pine Bush was?
Oh, sure. It's used to be a very hot spot for UFO sightings, and to some extent, I think it continues to be that way. Plus, Pine Bush is the site of a yearly or an annual get together of ufologists and people who are just sort of. It's not so much serious as it is fun, but I
Family
think
fun day, and then at night they have serious lectures.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing for Family Fun Day because it allows people. Sometimes if you say you're interested in UFOs, you get the look from your friends. But if you go there because you are interested, but you can say, no, I'm just going for the fun and all that stuff, I think it gives them an excuse to go there and get some information. So I think it's a wonderful thing in Pine Bush. But it would figure that, and also I think, I forget the lady's name now. Unfortunately, she passed away due to cancer, but she had some very strange experiences up in Pine Bush with balls of energy coming out, and I think it sort of stopped with her.
Ellie Crystal.
Crystal, yeah. Crystal was the name, yeah. But anyway, but Pine Bush is certainly the site of a lot of strange goings-on.
Do you want to read George's comment?
Sure.
George Cap?
George Cap says, enjoyed your podcast with Lisette Larkin. I have a buddy that I'll share this with. He was abducted, which was very painful, and this will help him know he's not alone. Again, that's the whole thing with Pine Bush, too, that they are not alone. Many of his friends have left him and given him that crazy label. I'm sure, too, that there's a lot of people out there that haven't shared their experiences, of course, because of getting labeled. Lisette, I'm glad you eventually received custody of your child. What a wild ride it must have been for him, too. Love and kisses to all, George Cap.
Okay, we have one final message here, one final thing that I want to read, which isn't actually eligible to be entered into the contest because it was a comment on the Russell Targ interview. But I think it's really very interesting. About a month and a half ago, we interviewed the very famous scientist and
Scientologist.
Well, no, he wasn't a Scientologist.
Oh, no, that's true. He
we
was
interviewed
the
Russell Targ, who is a laser physicist and worked on the remote viewing project.
Right.
So Bob B. had a very nice comment, and he said, "Thank you. Always enjoy hearing Russell Targ interviewed. Like the interviewers here, I was curious about the reported adherence to Scientology of some of those in the remote viewing program at SRI, Stanford Research Institute. The psychics Pat Price and Ingo Swann were both practicing psychologists, as was Hal Puthoff, director of the program. I'm no fan of Scientology and view it as an evil, abusive cult, but wondered about the Scientology connection to the above-named SRI people. Targ also commented on the topic on a Coast to Coast radio interview on July 5th, 2016, which I've carefully transcribed from. The Targ quote is thus, I was never involved with Scientology, so what I'm telling you is through hearsay, but what I understand is that the upper echelons of Scientology, they teach something like remote viewing, to go from one grade to another grade, and people were able to learn remote viewing, and it's not a secret that our two very best remote viewers, Ingo Swann and Pat Price, were both high-level Scientologists, and they attributed their ability to innate ability because they had psychic experiences as a child, but learning remote viewing is a part of moving up the various grades and into the upper echelons of Scientology. That was what Russell Targ said. Now back to Bob B. Targ's meaning may not be 100% clear in the above quote, but he seems to be suggesting Scientology's teachings on remote viewing. I believe the term used in Scientology is exteriorization, may actually have helped Price and Swan develop their psychic abilities they already had some experience with prior to in their Scientology involvement. So that's quite a fascinating comment from Bob B. But now it turns out that we have actually 4 winners instead of 3 winners of our contest. Would you like to announce them?
Oh, no. I'll do the drum roll. Well, I guess that's more of a trumpet. Okay,
oh, that's okay.
Same thing.
The first winner is Demiurge, NYC. The second winner is Freeman.
Yay, Freeman.
The third winner is Roxanne.
Hey, Roxanne.
And the fourth winner is Dee Danzo.
Yay.
Yay. Big
but thank
clap
you all.
for everybody. Thank you for every comment. Your comments were great. We appreciate them. Keep them coming in. Keep listening to Shattered Reality Podcast.
Yeah. And so until next week or next time,
this is Fahrusha.
And this is Kate Valentine saying
good night from Shattered Reality.